This is the second video I started the same way. What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to be talking about how to wall in Revit. It seems like a fairly mundane and fairly simple thing, and for the most time it is. But if you work on big projects, especially somewhere where you need to standardize things, or somewhere where you have a lot of repetition, I promise you, especially the second part of this tutorial would be very useful to you. We'll start with the absolute basics when it comes to walls in Revit, and I promise you it will become complex very, very quickly. I don't mean complicated, because I would argue nothing in Revit is complicated, but complex. Some of the things I'm going to cover today are the following. I have my little trusty lovely list here. We're going to talk about the compositions of a wall. We're going to talk about all the layers that go inside that would make the wall. There's a few things to keep in mind in there if you especially want to move into the 4D component of Revit, which is the extraction of information or the extraction of data and quantifying things. So this is very important. We would talk about location line and why this is important, especially when you draw big projects and you anticipate certain changes to come along onto specific walls. You want to make sure that you do it in such a way that it doesn't mess up your geometry or most of the parameters you've set up. Another thing, we're going to talk about modify extents. This is absolutely great when you talk about cantilevers and ceiling connections, so that without using 2D, you have almost perfect joints. So that's a good one. We're going to talk about wrapping. It can be extremely useful at inserts when you have windows or doors going inside of a door, especially if you're interested in photorealistic renderings, because you want to make sure that some materials wrap around your openings and you don't see the default material where you've cut your geometry. So this will be something I will cover today with you. Reveals and sweeps. This is a big one. I've seen different companies use them in different ways, but we're going to keep it extremely basic here and just enough so that you have the knowledge of how to create your own ones, how to add them as a complement to your walls, or how to build them inside your walls, such things as baseboards or cornices. So that's also coming up. And at the end, my absolute favorite part is how to make parts. If you've ever been in a situation where you look at a facade and you wonder, how do I divide this aluminum facade into different panels that have different materials with different colors without splitting surfaces and just painting on top? Because this messes up very easily. I got you. There's a beautiful way in which we can do it in Revit. So I'll just kind of stop talking. You would be able to see all the timestamps right here, right now. And let's start into it. All right, so I have a project open. I'm running Revit 23. Yeah, I'm running Revit 2023 because obviously that's, is the latest version. So I've opened a metric project, just a metric, simple architectural project. And when you want to create a wall, probably one of the best ways to do it is in plan, but you can also do it in 3D. That's perfectly fine. For those of you who are absolute noobs, hi. WA is the command. This is the shortcut. So if I hit WA, this would create a wall for me. WA for wall. Kind of a lot of the shortcuts in Revit you would notice over time have to do with either the first two letters of whatever it is that you are creating, or the first and the last one, or something somewhere around the first one and the last one. Doesn't matter. I'm talking too much again. So you would see that once you're creating this wall, I'm kind of moving my mouse here, and at the top right, or what we call the properties bar, you would have this drop-down menu, okay? And in this drop-down menu, Revit by default, or maybe your company already has a standard with preferred walls, interior and exterior, comes with a list of pre-built walls for you, okay? So if I select this first one, and if I just kind of draw it here. What? Oh, I'm on a structural plan. Fantastic. All right, I opened the structural model, not an architectural one. All right, metric architectural template. Let's do this. Much better. All right. All right. So WA to enable the wall, the same thing. You have a bunch of walls that are already there predetermined for you. So exterior brick on metal studs in this particular case looks very nice to me. If I zoom in, you will see that I don't see any of the layers of the wall. And the reason is because this particular view, the level of detail is set to coarse. I will just put it into fine, and you would be able to see all the layers in the wall. If you want to see some of the line thicknesses, TL is the shortcut you're looking for. So TL on my keyboard gives me this. In general, I don't like working in a scale 1 to 100. I would go to 1 to 50. It alleviates a little bit of that line weight thing. But line weights are something to talk about in a completely different chapter. So I have my wall here. I can select it. I have two grips, one at the top, one at the bottom. I can select it and kind of move the wall wherever I want. If I want to lock it in particular direction, you will see that Revit by default snaps to 90 degrees. So if I want to snap here, maybe 45 as well. Yeah, 45 as well, and then 0, of course. But if I have some weird angle and if I grab it and I hold shift while dragging it, you'll see that it would do it along the initial plane of the wall. So this is kind of useful. Another thing, when you're drawing a wall, I would like you to pay attention to several things. So I'll hit WA again to put me into the command. And usually in Revit, when you create anything, whatever it is, from a wall to a complex 3D element, in the middle of the creation of that component, you have this, the ribbon here at the top, the modify panel usually lights up in green. And this is completely normal. This is actually what we're hoping for. And depending on the element you're creating here at the bottom, it would give you some additional information, which would help you create a better element as you go, okay? So there will be things like your location line. We're going to talk about it in a second. If you want to chain it, and I'll just show you what this is right now. So I can click start point, end point, and you see how it chains the whole thing. So it's one continuous loop. If I hit my WA again to create my wall and turn off chain, it would just do one at a time. That's perfectly fine. Select them and delete them. There's too much stuff happening. So WA again to open up my wall. And you will see that very similarly to when you draft lines in Revit, you have access to the same type of kind of geometry creation. So if I need a rectangle, I can just hit the rectangle up here and create a rectangle this way. If for whatever reason, so WA, click the rectangle, my wall seems to be kind of going in the opposite direction of what I wanted it to be. Let's say I wanted the brick to go inside for whatever reason. Great way to do this very, very quickly is to select one or all of the walls that you want to select and hit spacebar. This is almost another truism in Revit, is that anytime you want to flip something, and this is almost every time, so not all the time, you hit space and it would reverse it. Sometimes it would flip it actually in 4 different directions, depending on how this particular element is created. For walls, it just flips it in and out. That's all you need to know. Okay, so WA, fantastic. One thing you'd appreciate coming from AutoCAD, let's say, or from Rhino, is that you actually don't have to hit enter after every command. So WA is just enough. You don't have to do WA enter, WA space. You're good to go. You can do circles if this is your thing. Of course, whoever's building this is going to hate you, but hey, we're designers. We're like experimenting with stuff. The other thing when you create the wall, and I'm just going to go in 3D at the same time. So I'll hit this little house icon here. And I'll do WT, which would split my view. If I had 5 views open or 5 little tabs here at the top, it would split it in such a way that so I can see all of them. And what you can see, and again, this is the default Revit setting. Of course, your company, if it has a standard, it would look maybe a little bit different. You'll see that I already have 2 levels, level 1 and level 2, okay? And level 2 has a particular height. Now, if I look, it seems that my walls, by default, as they were created, seems to surpass it. So one thing I can do is I can select all my walls and actually look at the properties here. So I have things like base constraint. And if I put myself to be perfectly aligned, you will see that the base constraint, in this case being level 1, corresponds to this level 1. So perfect, we start exactly where we want. But then the top constraint, or the top of the wall, is not constrained to anything. That's why it's called unconstrained. And it just has an arbitrary length or height of 8 meters. Now, to us, this is okay, but if we have a project in which, I want to say that my exterior walls go from certain level to another certain level, I can actually maybe want to constrain that to something. So I would say a top constraint, put it at level 2, boom, good to go. Does that mean that I cannot surpass it? Absolutely not. One of the things I can do right away is do top offset. So let's say if I just give it 1000 or 1 meter. So in Revit, if you're a newbie, hi, you can just type 1M. And hit enter. So this would automatically assume that it's not assume, but set 1000 millimeters. And you would see that here I would have exactly 1 meter of what? Because I'm in 3D, obviously, never mind. But it surpasses it here by a meter. If I select my walls again, you will see that there's this thing called base offset. So it's very similar. What's exactly the same thing as the top constraint. If I do 1000, you'll see it's going to lift it up. If I do negative 1000, it will bring it down. The beauty of this is, and again, welcome to parametric design. If this is one of your first exposures, of course, is that if I take that level and if I move it up, regardless of how much, this top offset of 1000 1000 millimeters would always be true. So this is great. Control Z just to go back. These settings that we're looking here at inside the properties are actually available to you within the creation of a wall. So if I do WA again, and if I look here at my ribbon, I can already say, hey man, I want this to be a height. I want it to be up to level 2, and I want to chain it because I'm going to be creating several of them. My location line coming in a second. And if I have any particular offsets or radius. Radius is a funny one because I can create a corner and it would round it for me in this way. So if this is your cup of tea, you can do it right away while you are drawing, okay? So let's talk about the composition of the wall, actually what goes into a wall. Because right now, Revit has given you some kind of a composition. You can obviously check it and modify it. But in my case, I want to start from zero. I want to start from scratch. So I'm going to delete all of these, or even better, if you're a newbie. Hi. I'll select all of this, and actually you can see that you can change the type of wall that you're choosing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select an absolutely generic one. So there's this one that is called generic 200. I'll click on this one, and you'll see there's absolutely nothing happening because there's just a single material. I'll select it and I'll hit CS on my keyboard, which means create similar. This will become one of your new friends as well. So CS, draw my wall wherever, and let's modify it. Now, the way you modify a wall, or you talk about all of its compositions or some of the extra stuff we're going to see a little bit later on, is by selecting it and going to the properties at the top where it says edit type. Okay, so this is where, if you click it, we would create a completely new type of a wall. And then we're going to start building in parameters into it and giving it all the juicy stuff that actually makes a wall in Revit, all right? So the first thing, this is already a wall called generic. I want to duplicate this so I can create a new one. There's no create new in Revit in most of the cases, or like 99% of them. You always duplicate something that already exists because Revit is built in such a way that it cannot exist, let's say, without a single wall. There's always at least one that needs to stay inside, all right? So I'll duplicate this and I'll call it 00, and this is just so that it stacks it on top. I'll call it 00 exterior brick wall. All right. Now this wall is duplicated. The type, at least, the type of wall is created by duplicating an existing one. And what I'm going to do is here at the bottom, I'll hit the preview button. So this would give me the kind of like the layers we were looking at a little bit earlier, even though right now there's nothing. In order for me to change this, I would come to structure here and hit edit. All right. And one other thing, just this is a pro tip, never look at it in plan. You see here at the bottom, instead of plan, just go in section. In my opinion, it's always a little bit more interesting to look at it this way because it also unlocks certain options for you. So if I go back here in floor plan, you'll see things like modify, merge region, sweeps, reveals, blah, 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 became unavailable for us because these are things we examine in section, all right? So by default, just leave it at section. Trust me, it will just make your life easier. One less thing to think about, do it once, you're good to go. I'll give it a height of 3000 so that I can zoom in a little bit on it. Here at the top, you have stuff just like it's telling me it's a basic wall family. You don't have to think about it at this point. The total thickness, and you can already see that Revit can start calculating things like resistance and thermal mass. But this also comes with the addition of materials which have this information built into them. And don't worry about it, Revit gives you some base to start with this. I want you to pay attention to the following thing. Here at the top, it says exterior side. Here at the bottom says interior side. And then we have these two gray lines, which tell us that there's a core boundary. So now Revit is looking at the composition of a wall and is looking at it and it says, you know what? I recognize that your wall has things which, let's just call it fluff for a second, your gypsum wallboard, your exterior panels, or whatever it is. But there's also the core of your wall, okay? This is going to be the structure of the wall. We can already kind of define it this way. So let's just go back into it. One of the things that I would like to mention to you now is that things that go into the core boundary are not always necessarily just structure, and this can save you a lot of time and also graphics and also the way you draw stuff. Anyway, so see you in a second. So you see that we have the structure here, and I'll do a very extremely typical Canadian wall composition because of our winter, okay? and it would be a metal stud composition. So I would do 152 millimeters, which is the very typical like 6-inch stud, okay? And I'll just insert a bunch more. And what I would like you to notice now is that the function is already predefined. But if I hit the drop-down menu, you can see that I have options. So Revit can already categorize, and keep in mind, Revit, alongside any other BIM software, is just a way to hyper-categorize data, all right? That's its only function, and this is how it's able to do analysis. This is how we're able to pull out quantities. This is how we're able to pull out schedules. This is it, the hyper-categorization of things. So I can say that a particular layer in my wall, it's either a structure, a substrate. A substrate is usually something like plywood or OBS board. This would be the one. Thermal layer, so think about air gaps, think about insulation. Well, that's it. And then you have finish 1 and finish 2, and those are usually the things that come after after your installation, right? So those are things like gypsum board, those are things like your brick, your aluminum panels, your stone, whatnot have you. And the thing is that Revit, in putting these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it creates a hierarchy of importance. Because if you have two elements that are colliding with each other, let's say finish 5 would give way to a thermal layer, meaning that a finish 5 right here, which is the lowest on the hierarchy, even though it's the highest number, would never go through a thermal layer. The thermal layer would always take precedence, okay? So in this particular case, I'm just gonna go ahead and create my my wall composition. Why do I keep hitting insert? So let's say a typical brick, 90 millimeters here in Canada. Then I usually have a 1 inch or 25 millimeters of an airspace. Right behind it, I would put in 100 millimeters sprayed on insulation, which is usually my air barrier 2, depending on the product you're using. Then on top of this, I would have an exterior grade gypsum board. So, and I'll keep it in the core boundary, and I'll see why in a second. Very, very important. And then when I go inside, just because I want to, you know, keep everything very soundproof, let's say I'll put resilient bars of 22 millimeters, and then I'll just bring this all the way down, and this would be my gypsum board of 16 millimeters. So that means that I overdid it here. So let's say if I just remove, you see that the layers are now created, right? We have my 152 structure. I have my exterior gypsum board on which usually I can put my membranes. I have my structure, sorry, not structure. I have my insulation, airspace, and brick. The thing is that right now everything's called structure. It doesn't have any materials, and this is why Revit, the only thing it's able to tell me is like, hey, listen, man, like your wall is thick 418 millimeters, but there's no properties to it, all right? So let's start assigning materials to it. I'll start from the outside. I'll hit material, and there's like these little 3 dots. So this menu would open up, and I would just type in the search bar, brick. Again, if you work in an office, you might have a lot of materials that are already created and ready for you to go, which also have the rendering texture. So there's so many steps that you're covering in one shot. So, but okay, I'll hit brick. For thermal layer, so for my air layer, keep in mind, you don't always have to go through the process here. If you know the absolutely exact name of the material you want to put in, you can literally just punch it in. So if I type air and hit tab, you will see that Revit said, oh yeah, that material actually exists. I don't have to give you an air. If I say error, it will say, hey man, that material is invalid. Please enter a valid one. Sounds good to me. I'll just stick it to air. All right. Now I need insulation. So insulation, rigid insulation. Sure. Let's do this one. Then I have my gypsum board. So if I type gypsum wall board, that works. See, I can actually copy this title and slap it right down there. This would be, I don't think that by default Revit has resilient channel, but it has stud. So some kind of a metal stud layer. Voila. And I can copy and paste it here. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to. So this is the quick and dirty way of doing it. If you work in a company where you actually want to extract quantities, all right, instead of just having metal stud layer, you would have a specific material which is properly described. You would have something that says, let's say, a 22 millimeter resilient channel. Perfect. So you can actually take out the square footage of that so that you can make your calculations at the end. Instead of saying just gypsum wall board being super generic, I would say, no, this is 16 millimeter type whatever gypsum wall board, or let's say type X if it's fire rated. Here, instead of just gypsum wall board again for 30 millimeters, I would have a title which explains the whole thing. And I'll be able to say, this is 13 millimeters exterior grade gypsum wall board. The same thing for the insulation. Ideally, you would specify it because you can have multiple types of insulation, even multiple types of rigid insulation within a project. So in general, you want to be able to create all of these materials so that you can use Revit to the fullest extent, okay? And the last thing we need to take care of is all the layering here. So we can agree, hopefully, that that metal stud layer, it's a structure. I hope that we can agree that this gypsum wall board is not a structure, but it's a substrate because I will use it to attach my insulation onto it. My rigid insulation fits into the thermal layer description, my air layer description, fantastic. And my brick, I'll put it as finish 4 because it's not quite as flimsy as, let's say, it would be my gypsum board on the inside. So metal stud layer, I would say this is 4 and then that this is 5, okay? So now we can see that my wall actually starts to look like a real thing, you know, and this is great. And I'll hit OK, and I'll hit OK again. And you can see that all the layers inside my wall were created. If I select it here in 3D and type BX, it would create a bounding box around it, not to be confused with BS. All right. So you can see all the layers that are happening inside. Yeah, okay, fantastic. Now let's talk about location lines. So this is the next step. We've created the wall. It works. It's great. Now I need to model it in 3D space. And I need to model in such a way that if I ever need to change something about that wall, it's not going to mess up my project, okay? And which makes just more work to do. So I would delete this, all right? And I would create 4 grid lines. And for the purpose of this exercise, let's pretend that these 4 grid lines are the outside of a concrete slab for your building. So very simple kind of concrete extrusion, a box extrusion, a rectangular extrusion, my goodness, it's getting late. So the shortcut should be GR for grid. Oh, there you go. So I would create one like this, and then I can copy this one. If you're new to Revit, you would see that it already named it number 2 right away. I can select it CS to create another one, but now I don't want this to be 3. I want this to be capital A. And if I copy it again, it'll be capital B. Fantastic. And let me just put some normal dimensions here. So let's say I want this to be, I don't know, 9 meters away, and I want this to be 6 meters away. You know, parking for, no, what was it? Form follows parking. This is it. All right. I want to make sure that I want to put these 2 on top of each other. Okay. So we're pretending that this is actually a concrete slab, and in a concrete slab, and you know what? Instead of pretending, let's actually draw it right here. So if I go floors, architectural, boom, rectangle, whoop, and I see, okay, fantastic. So now it actually exists in 3D. Well, we don't see it here. Remove this section box. Here it is. This is my slab, okay? And so the thing is that in a concrete building, what you're looking to do, by the way, I just hit TL. What you're looking to do is to align. So this is the outside here of the wall on the right, and this on the left is the inside. In a concrete building, in general, that is, what you're trying to do is you want to make sure that you align the edge of your slab with the outside of your wall, well, with the outside of the gypsum board, right? So that you can actually have a continuous surface from the columns to the slab edge to the gypsum board, so you can have one continuous surface to put your insulation on. So this is kind of like the whole logic. But you would see that when I select my wall, my little handle here, which also indicates where the wall was drawn, right? So if I do CS or WA, you would see that it's actually not exactly where I need it to be, all right? And this is because while I'm drawing, WA again, the location line is the wall center line, okay? So that means that if I draw my wall here, okay, I have it, but you know what? I'm actually just going to create a section box again. You would see that, you know what? I really don't want to see the grid lines here, so I'm just gonna, Hello. Okay. You see that it's actually not aligned with where I needed it to be. Actually, what I need is that the gypsum board and the edge slab are at the same place. So is there another way that upon drawing that wall, I can actually set up this right away? Absolutely. So WA to get into the wall command, and I'll hit the drop down menu here. So you can see that you can either align it with a core center line, the finish face of the exterior or the interior, depending on what your constraints are, or with the core face of the interior and exterior. So what I need to do in this case is actually align it with the exterior, because keep in mind when we created our wall, if I'll go to edit type, here I had my core boundary towards the exterior and the outside is right after this exterior grade gypsum board, blah, blah, blah. So if I select it, I'll do WA or CS to create similar, and I would select core face exterior, and then draw my rectangle. And now you can see that it fits exactly where I needed it to be, okay? And even if I go as far as to, let's say, join this geometry, because this is also something you can do in Revit, you can join stuff. If I join this geometry, you would see that it would cut right through it. Remember when I told you that Revit is a way to hyper-categorize things? Well, it's also to create hierarchies of importance with in between elements. The floor is always more important than the wall. So this is why the structure of the floor, which by the way, the sandwich of the floor behaves in the exact same manner that the wall would behave, will take kind of dominance over the wall, and the wall would give way when they do the join. When you do the joining of the geometry, my goodness. And one of the reasons why this is important right now is because let's say I made a mistake and these 6-inch studs are actually too much. I don't need it. All my insulation is on the outside. I don't have that big of windows. Forget it. 4 inches is more than enough. So if I go and if I select my wall, let's say I select this one, and if I edit the type and I come here and if I say, hey, look, I don't need 152. I need 102 millimeter studs. So, and if I hit OK, I want you to look what's going to happen here. This wall would reduce in size, but that location line would not move, okay? So if I say OK, and then, okay, let's do apply, click, it became smaller. So by choosing the proper way or the proper location line, you can actually model your entire Revit model with the ability that at some point you might need to change the walls or the wall thickness, and they will stay exactly where they're supposed to stay, okay? So your alignments would be great. Let's say if you have a concrete wall, which is doing your cross bracing, and you want to make sure that you align with the edge of it, well, then you will choose the align finish face, exterior or interior, depending on what it is. But so this was it for location lines. All right, now that we're done with the location line, I want to talk about something which is called modify extents, because it can be very useful in some particular use case scenarios, because you know how we grab that wall and we can kind of move it up and down. Okay, I'm on unjoin, which is the same here as the base constraint. I can say 0, right? So if I select all of my walls here and if I set them to 0, I wonder if there's a way for me to take just the brick and just bring it all the way down, okay? Or just the brick, the airspace, and the insulation, and just bring them all the way down without necessarily moving the rest of the wall. This is usually used in cantilevers. You can see it quite often. You can see it in soffits where just the brick, not even the insulation, would come all the way down and it will sit on some kind of a structural lintel. But you don't need the whole wall to come down. You also don't need to create another type of wall, which is just brick, and then you fall into the whole issue of alignment and whatnot have you. But so what I want to do is I just want to make sure that just the bottom of my brick is able to go down. All right. So the way we do this is I would select my wall, go to edit type, and you'll see you'll be going to edit type in Revit all the freaking time. You will put yourself in section, but you don't have to because you've already done it. You're not in plan. You hit edit, and remember these things that were turned off and now they're on all of a sudden? So if you hit modify here at the top left, if you hit modify and you zoom in and you see how you can select the bottom of a particular layer, in this case the brick, and if I hit it, come on, click, I can unlock it. And I'll just stop there for the moment and I'll say, okay. So now you see that my wall actually has two grips. One of them functions for the wall as per usual. The other one, however, functions just for the brick, okay? So this is a way in which you can actually manipulate one or several layers. Let's say I don't need just the brick, but I need the airspace and the insulation for whatever reason to come down as well. I can grab my wall, edit type, go to the structure again, hit modify. And in this particular case, I'll select the other two layers, at least the bottoms of them, select them, unlock them, and then hit OK again. And you'll see now they would follow suit. One thing you cannot do in Revit, at least as far as I know, what you cannot do is you cannot select one on the inside layers, let's say here, and then one on the outside. They always need to be adjacent layers to do that. Also, there's absolutely nothing preventing you from doing the exact same thing on the top, okay? So select the wall, edit type, edit the structure, modify, zoom all the way to the top, and you can select all the elements that you would like to be able to go up, all right? So I'll just unlock them, say okay, bam. And now you see this division and the little grips that show up again. So I can grab them and pull them up. And it's just my section box, which is preventing me from seeing. If you want to be precise in the control of these extents, be it on the top or at the bottom, once you select your wall, you will see that there's something new that popped up, which is top extension distance. So I can say I need it to be precisely 500 for whatever reason, but anyways, at least now you know. And the other thing is that base extension distance. All right, so this would be, I don't know, let's see if I say -1 meter, it would go all the way down to 1 meter. So this is a very, very quick way, depending again on your use case scenario, to manipulate layers within the wall composition. All right, good. All right, now let's move on to something called wrapping, okay? Wrapping is Revit's ability, or your ability again, to manipulate certain layers within the wall every time you place either a window or a door, or there's some kind of an interruption within the wall, okay? So I'll give you an example here, and I personally really don't like the default Revit families when it comes to windows. So let's say if I do WN window, and if I just kind of put it in the wall, they come with this very, very, I mean, even the representation here is absolutely awful, but they come with these frames on the inside where they kind of put their own material, and I don't like it. And this is not how, especially for institutional buildings, how it works. So instead of a window, I'll give you an example here with just a wall opening, okay? And you can create a wall opening if you go to architecture, and then here to the right, there's openings, wall, select the wall where you want to create that opening, and I just kind of create a super random outline. So one of the things that you can see right away, and I think that I can maybe bring this, you know what? All right, fantastic. So you see that I have this opening. For rendering purposes, sometimes what is nice, if let's say your brick turns a little bit and let's say reaches somewhere, and if your gypsum wall board also does the same, because right now, if I go in my 3D, let's say I'll do fine, and I'll say, let's say realistic, okay? You would see that, I mean, okay, ugly texture of brick, we got it. But you will see that besides the texture that we have on the wall, and this is kind of what we want, on the sides, there's nothing. There's just the default material. So even if you do Enscape, V-Ray, or, you know, like Lumion, it would just say, oh, this is a default wall material, and just put it white, and you cannot necessarily control it on per element basis. So one of the things that you want to be able to do is to have something wrap here, maybe on both sides. So one way you can control this is you can select the wall. Guess where we're going? Edit type. You got this one. So hit edit type. And you'll see that here, right underneath structure, I have something called that says wrapping at inserts and wrapping at ends. So I would put both of them to, let's say, exterior for now, just so we can observe what happens. And I'll hit apply. And okay, there we go, it worked. So if I look at my opening here, I can see that there's a bunch of layers which wrapped around. And I can also see that in my 3D, this is also reflected. So now when I render, I don't have this kind of like random material there. Also, personal opinion makes your plans look a little bit more legible. Personal opinion, a lot of people might disagree with me. The thing is that, first of all, you can actually control which layers do the wrapping, and also if it comes from just the exterior side, the interior side, or from both of the sides, okay? So let's fix that. if I select my wall again, and if I go into edit type, if I hit edit, you would see that here, not only can we determine the materials, the thickness, and blah, 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 but also if this particular layer needs to wrap or not, okay? So in my case, I don't need my thermal, like my the airspace or whatever to wrap. All I just need is the brick. And on the inside, I will just leave the gypsum board to turn, okay? This is gonna be the only thing. And I'll say, okay, click, click. So now you can see that it's only the brick that's turning. Okay, great, but we're still missing, you know, maybe the inside can do it as well. Select it, edit type. And then, and then instead of exterior, let me see if I do both, what would I give me? Yeah, because sometimes it considers openings as an end, which is kind of nuts, but whatever. So let's say if I do interior, you would see that in this case is the gypsum wall board, which is gonna do it. All right. So this is your wrapping. If I take that wall and if I just kind of make it freestanding here, you will see the same thing happen, which is nice. I can imagine if you have like some kind of an exterior wall, but not to the building, like legit outside of the building, where you have, I don't know, some kind of a structure in the middle and just 2 aluminum panels on the side, and you're gonna put a sign on it. Well, then, you know, you would have, let's say, aluminum structure, another aluminum, and you can just make one of them wrap around, so you don't have to do any painting after this whatsoever. You can just go ahead and render. You know, you can put your sweeps, you can put your reveals if you have any particular joints, and just call it a day. That's it. So this was for wrapping. Let's move on. So the next topic I would like to cover with you is stack walls, okay? This is something that I don't see a lot of people use often, and I understand why, but at the same time, if you have a standardized project, if you wish, or something that repeats itself over and over and over again, can be extremely, extremely useful. And for the purpose of this particular exercise, one of the first things I'll do is I'll just remove these kind of partial modify settings, all right? I'll just come here at the bottom, modify, select them and lock them. And I think that if I lock the last one, oh no, I actually need to do all of them one by one. All right, I'll just do it at the top as well. And now my scroll button decided to stop working, so I cannot pan around. That's just awesome. Anyways, I hit okay, okay, boom, now it behaves normally. Now, what a stacked wall is, well, it's in the name, but what Revit allows you to do is to actually have 2 walls on top of each other. And you would see, remember at some point I told you that Revit cannot allow to not have at least one of something? Stack walls is just another example. So if I do WA, and this time I'll just do it in 3D space, and if I open my drop-down menu, I'm pretty sure that, there you go. At the bottom, I have stacked walls and it's just exterior, blah, blah, blah. And I'll hit it and I'll just draw it, okay? So what we're actually looking at is not just one wall, but think about it in a way as a family of 2 walls stacked on top of each other. This is it. So in this particular case, the default Revit one, they have this like stone wall, and then they have this brick wall on top. So that makes perfect sense. If I select it and if I say BX, so I can create a box and I can cut through it, you'll see that I can see their composition, and it makes perfect sense. Whatever the stud or the concrete block is a continuous thing, the insulation as well, and they're just changing the finish on the outside, okay? But I would walk you through the process of creating our own one. But in our case, instead of using it for the base, we can actually use it for the parapet. This is something that on the last project that I've worked on is something that we use all the time, because one of the beauties of these things is that instead of having to create one wall and then a second one, and then when you get to the parapet, a third one. So now you have to manage 3 walls, and if one moves, you know, maybe the others will follow, maybe they will not. Maybe you adjust only the middle one because this is what you're cutting in plan. And, you know, if you need to move it, well, you know, and you forget to go in section. Anyways, it's a hassle. So it's actually very useful to use stack walls in this particular case. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take that wall that we already created, all right, and I will duplicate it because I'll create a new type. This is going to be my parapet. I'll create a new type starting with the one we already have. So I'll select it, edit type, the little window pops up, and I'll duplicate, okay? And instead of calling it exterior brick wall, I'll just call it exterior brick parapet. All right, fantastic. And I'll hit OK. And the only difference between, let's say, my parapet and my original wall would be, let's say, the size of the stud. Let's say here I just need 64 millimeters, something very simple. Oh, and the other thing I don't need is my resilient channels. Like I actually just don't need that at all. So I would delete it. And the other thing, it's a little bit of an overkill, but I'll put 19 millimeters and not gypsum board. I would put plywood. A lot of parapets are just mostly done in plywood, so that's fine. And I'll say okay. And for my other wall, I would just want to make sure that I'm back at my typical wall composition instead of 102, 150. So 6-inch metal studs at 400 on center. Voila. So ideally what I will do is I would take, that's a funny effect. Okay. I would take this brick wall and I would put it on top of this one as a stack wall. Okay. So let's try this. I would take this one, I would hold Control, another trick, and then drag it. So this would make a copy of it. So this is how you make copies. And I would select the stack wall and I would say Edit Type. And again, I would say Duplicate because I want to start from scratch. All right. I would duplicate, I would call it 0, 0, stack wall, and I'll put like a little descriptor, brick parapet, whatever. Usually these descriptors are nice in brackets. So if people are wondering, you know, does a certain wall exist? They can very easily find it this way. So put descriptors in brackets. Pro tip. I'll go to my structure and you would see that I have the two walls. Okay. So they're using their default ones, but here at the bottom, what I would like to do is I would like to go back to my own one, and you see how useful it is to call them 0, 0 now. So this would be my exterior brick wall, click. And then in the top, what I would like to have is my exterior brick parapet. All right. And I'll just zoom in here and I will see that they're not aligned at all. And when we talk about offset, see in this particular case, it's using the core center line. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the core, in the finish face of the core. Remember how we did this gypsum board goes inside the boundary? That's precisely the reason. Makes my life a lot easier. I don't have to do any calculations of particular offsets and whatnot. I have one continuous line the entire time. Love it. So drop down, core face, exterior. Thank you so much. So now I have my brick in the front is perfectly aligned. And then here, because technically here's going to be the slab, and I'm just going to model it in a second. Except that what I want to make sure is that my parapet, it's actually a set height, but it's my wall at the bottom that it's a variable. So I would select my brick wall, hit that it's a variable, and the top, I'll just call it a 1 meter. Let's just put it this way. So now, regardless of how tall this is, so regardless of how tall my wall is, my parapet would always be 1 meter. So if I constrain my wall properly, that means that my parapet all around would be exactly the same, and I don't have to think about it. Again, here you can kind of fall into offsets, but I don't need, so anyways, let's just say 100 just so that we can, you know, demonstrate it. But because I've done my job well, creating the layers, I can put everything at a 0 and I'm good to go. And I'll say, okay. And here's the product of my genius. You know what? I'm actually going to make this even more complex now. I'm going to take this parapet that we created and I'm going to duplicate and create a new one. And I'll just call this stone base. We're going to make that stack wall even more complicated. So this is going to become 200 all of a sudden, and it's not brick anymore. Let's just call it stone. And let's see what it is. Concrete casting. You know what? I'm okay with this. Concrete base. Boom. So I can go back to my stack wall, edit the type, actually insert another one. I'll bring it down here. It would be, let's say, 600 tall, and I'll make sure that this is my stone base. Woohoo. Okay. And one thing I just need to do in this type is make sure that my studs in this particular case are 152 as well. So look at this beautiful, beautiful wall that I have right now that's missing one layer. Sorry, this one is actually missing one layer so that I can get back there. So this would be insert. This would be gypsum wall board right there. We said it was 16 metal stud layer. Boom. And then this we said it was 22, right? So now we can actually match them. See, and if I do BX, so if I am able to cut through it, you would see that I have a continuous structure, which is precisely what I need. And I just have different things kind of sticking out of it. And again, my parapet, which is smaller because this is precisely what I want. So technically, what I can do is I can say, instead of using this just regular brick wall, I want to be using this stack wall all around. All right, sounds good. I'll just hover over one of them, hit tab so I can select all of them, open my menu, go all the way down, and I'll choose the one that we just created. Boom, a beauty. So, and I'll make sure that they all go just to the second floor so that there's no top offset. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this floor and I'll pretend it's a roof just for a moment. And I'll say copy, come here to, I haven't done my shortcuts yet. Okay. Align to selected levels. I want it to be aligned to level 2. Great. And the only thing I would need to do is make sure that actually, you know what? 1000 was a great idea. Boom. So if I create a scope box around it now, there you go. I have this perfect kind of junction in here. And if I ever join this geometry, let's say this with this, and then this with this, you would see that my junction looks perfect as it will be in real life without me having to do any 2D. If I create a section, by the way, this would be true there as well. So if I create a section going this way, and if I look at it and I make sure that my detail level is in fine, my junction is pretty much done. So let's say if I'm working on my wall sections, I actually don't need to kind of model anything here. I can just kind of identify everything, you know, there is. Very important things if you're working on a big project, even though you're using a stack wall, when you tag a wall, you see how it only tags the component of the stack wall. So don't worry about it. You're not tagging a stack wall, so your types, Revit would keep on recognizing them. So you're good to go. Topic for another day. Okay, so this is the functionality of a stack wall in a nutshell. Let's move on. And the next topic that I would like to cover with you are reveals and wall sweeps. All right, they're very useful when you want to create joints in panels, or if you want to kind of have a decorative, and I know this is a bad word in architecture, but if you want to have a kind of a decorative extrusion that goes along your wall, be it though vertical or be it though horizontal. So let's start with the most simple thing. Let's start with a sweep, okay? What I will want you to do for me is go under the architecture tab, and you see where you see wall, hit the drop down menu, and you would see this thing called wall sweep. Hit it, horizontal or vertical. Let's just stick with horizontal for the moment. And there's already something. So I would just place it anywhere. Click and then escape to exit the command. All right. You would see that you have this extrusion. And by the way, you can even give it the material that you want. And we will do this in a second. But let's just look at some of the properties of this sweep. So this sweep, you can actually move it up and down. You actually have these little handlebars so you can kind of shorten it as you wish. You can also have more than one sweep on a wall. So you can have plenty. If I do wall sweep, click, click, it's there. Wall sweeps also obeyed by windows and doors. So if I put a window in here, the wall sweep would stop. So this is something just to keep in mind. And the other thing is that if you want to have several wall sweeps that run on several walls, you don't have to create a bunch of them. You can actually just continue them, okay? I would just create one from scratch and I'll say wall sweep and I'll hit this wall and then this wall and this wall and so on and so on. You get the idea. So now I have this continuous sweep. If for whatever reason I created one and I've already dimensioned it and I just don't want to delete it and restart because they've tagged it, what you can do is select it, and here at the top, you can just either add or remove walls. All right, so if I say add, boom, I want to put it on this wall. So now it sits there. Okay, so this is a bug, by the way. This usually doesn't happen. Can we do it yet? Wow, Revit, you are fantastic today. All right, okay. But if I select it though, and if I say add or remove and click the same wall, it would remove it from there. I swear to God, this is a Revit bug. The other thing you can do with a sweep is modify the returns. So let's say if I click this one, I can actually pull it. Oh, it actually allows me to go just in one direction. That makes sense. But now it's actually not associated with the wall whatsoever. All right, so something to keep in mind. Reveals work in the exact same fashion, okay? So if I go under my architecture tab, wall, drop down menu, and if I hit reveal, I can click and you will see that it will create a reveal for me, all right? If I need it to be on more than one wall, it behaves in the exact same way. I'll select it, add or remove walls, it will do it. Oh, see, now it didn't disappear. So you can create joints like that if you want to, let's say in an aluminum panels, or if you have a particular break between two materials, this is one way for you to do it. Now, by the way, and I'm just gonna kind of mention this very quickly right now. So let's say if I just kind of create this sweep here, they behave like any other family in Revit in the sense that you can select them and you can, first of all, they're assigned to a level. So if you always need them to be exactly 1 meter from, let's say in this case, level 1, you can do that. You can also edit their type and choose a profile if you have something specific in mind. You can also specify their material, which you can also tag afterwards, or you can schedule. All right. In this particular case, let's just load another profile. And this is being kind of the case for the past few versions, that if you go in under the insert tab and you hit load family, those are kind of like the default ones in Revit. So if I go to kind of here and if I find profiles, oh, baseboard. Fantastic. So let's say if I want to use, this baseboard is a little bit more interesting, and I would load it, and then I'll come here and I would edit type, duplicate this and call it baseboard. And I would actually look for the profile that we just downloaded. I think is this one, base 7 inches. Let's choose just something bigger. Okay. And I think it's transparent just because there's no material to it. And I'm going to put something stupid like concrete. Or let's do wood. Let's do any sort of wood, cherry. That works. Please come out here. There you go. So I can actually create wall sweeps like that for my cornices, for my baseboards, for anything I want. And so that means that, first of all, your elevations would look a lot more realistic, you know, straight out of the gate. And your renderings too. You know, it's very rare that in real life you just have a wall hit a floor, you know, like in museums maybe, then even like maybe a reveal would be that transition. But so I can select it, add, remove walls, and just kind of add it and keep on going around. Where is it? Boom. Okay, so let's try something new though. So I can add reveals, I can add sweeps individually, and that's perfectly fine. But what if I have a condition where I have a particular wall, let's say an interior wall, where all of them just have baseboards indiscriminately all around? If I have this type of wall, therefore there's the baseboard, okay? So what I can do is I'm just going to kind of copy this one in the middle, and I'm going to replace it with an interior wall, or any of the generic ones, in a matter of fact. So I'll select this one and I would make sure that interior, who cares? Okay, there it is. And I'll just kind of drop it down there. Is there an opening there? Yeah, okay. So let's say I have this particular wall, and what I would like to do is I would like to add a baseboard on each side. I can actually build it into the wall. So anytime I draw it, it's part of it. The way I do it is I selected, you guessed it, edit type. And then in section, look at that, I'll edit the structure. I would say sweeps. So see, now it becomes available to you. Sweeps, and it's, you know, I can add as many as I can, or at least I think it's as many as you can. So I would add a new one. I don't want the default profile. I want the base, the big one. And if I hit apply, oh, it's right there. It's already kind of put it in the right place. In material, let's say, yes, cherry works. Apply. And okay, usually changes color. So distance. So this is the distance from the base. So if it's not a baseboard, but if it's something else that needs to sit at a certain distance from the ground, let's say I'll do 200 just for the demonstration. See, it will move up. You can choose if it's on the exterior or interior side. If I say apply, it will move it on the interior. I can have some offsets, so meaning that it doesn't need to be stuck to the wall. So if I, let's say, do 200 here as well, you see it would move it outside. Flip is if the geometry is not oriented in the right way. And I I'll just stop at this for now, just to kind of keep it basic. So let's say I need it to be stuck, say apply. And let's say I would choose this layer and I would duplicate it. And then in this case, it will be just the exterior, okay? Apply. So now I have two baseboards always. If I say, okay, boom. I draw my wall, and it would always have it. Even if I, let's say, delete it and continue it through, you would see that that junction just looks beautiful. And especially if you later on move into renderings, it would just give that extra layer of realism, especially after you apply proper materials in your favorite software of choice. So this is one way you can very quickly do this. You might tell me, Daniel, this is not enough. Obviously, we're missing cornices. All right, so I'm just going to load it again from here. Let's look for a cornice. There has to be a cornice. Of course, there you go. Cornice to load. I'll hit this wall, edit type, edit, go to the sweeps again. And I'm just going to, you know what, duplicate this twice. Exterior. So I'm just going to leave, let's say this is going to be the interior. And this would be cornice. There you go. Good to go. Cornice. And instead of the base, I would just say, give me the top. I would say apply. Maybe I need to flip the geometry. Maybe this is all I need to do. Blah, 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 blah. Flip. No, those are the bases. Sorry. Flip. Apply. Nope. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that means that if I do this, how big is it? 4 3/8. So that means I'm going to do an offset, okay? Offset from the top, or distance from the top. Let's just see if this would, wrong direction. Okay, so this would be with a negative. Okay, apply. Voila, there you go. Copy, paste, boom, Gucci to go. I hit OK, boom. So now I have cornices, right? So if I take these two walls and if I bring them to, so here's the attached top and base, and I'll just set that they attach there. Boom. So now my walls would always have cornices if I just kind of extend them to there and then, okay, sure, there. So this is how you can use the sweeps, okay, to build them in. Let's do the same thing, but instead of a sweep, we can use a reveal, all right? And you know what, this is my victim now. I'm just going to use this particular one. So if I select my wall, I would edit the type, edit the structure, and then hit reveals, all right? I would add a new one. In this case, I would just use the default one. And let's say I need it to be always like 1500 from the floor. And I said apply. Okay, this is too much. Reveals. Let's say I would want to offset it 100. A little bit more. If I say 110. Okay, let's just say that. And then I'll actually duplicate it, and then I'll do one on the interior, one on the exterior. So apply. All right, doesn't matter. Proves the point. So see, now there's like this particular detail that's happening into the wall. So again, you can kind of create very interesting geometries within the walls, which are actually part of the family of the wall. So you can do this very, very quickly across the entire project, especially if you have repetitive, I don't know if you're doing a school, classrooms, and there's a particular element that has to be in all of them. If let's say all the corridors have a specific type of baseboard and you want to be able to see it in 3D, but also when you do your, let's say, corridor elevation, classroom elevations, or, you know, hospital room elevations, and you want to be able to tag them extremely quickly, this is it. The other thing, quantifiable, schedulable. They're great. You can actually measure how many linear meters of a particular sweep you have so that you can actually do your cost estimation. All right. And then I'm going to move to the last part of this tutorial, which is how to make parts. Meaning that you see how by having these sweeps here or these reveals, it almost creates different panels along the geometry of the wall. But the thing is that what if I want to have them at different levels for different walls, or I want to be able to change the distances dynamically after I've already created them? This is where make parts comes in, and it's probably one of my favorite tools to use. All right, so let's dig into it. All right, let's do this. And I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised that this is only 1 hour in. I gave this same lecture a lot slower to a class, to an architecture firm here in Montreal, and it took me 3 hours in order to go into depth with everything. But it's nicer when you have people who ask questions, and you see their kind of mind being illuminated. All right, make parts. Why is this thing important? Okay, let me just create another wall type because, you know, we're on fire today. So instead of this ugly brick, I'll just put some kind of like aluminum panels, and I will create, before we start, a bunch of different colors of that aluminum panel, just so that I can illustrate my point, okay? First of all, I'll do edit type. And instead of brick and instead of 90, I will put something like 32. This is common, let's say, if you're using PanFab here in Canada. I think they also shipped it in the US. Anyways, I would hope they do, really. Aluminum for some of you, I suppose. Let's just hit OK, and let's just see what this looks like. Great, fantastic. I'll just go to manage here and go to my materials and find aluminium. Funny thing, you have aluminum and aluminium. This is beautiful. All right, duplicate material and assets. Oh, this is new. This used to be only duplicate. You know what? Materials and shared assets. I don't want anything shared between these materials except for the name. So this would be blue, not brew. So let's say if I just the appearance. Come on very quickly. You know, I'm actually not that worried about the rendered because we're not rendering today, but I'm just gonna put some kind of a blue here and apply, and then I'll just kind of duplicate this and the shared assets. And then I'll call this yellow. And then here I'll just put some kind of I was looking for something a little bit more Pikachu, but hey, poop works. Okay, so I have aluminium blue, and aluminium yellow. Great. So I just want to make sure that they kind of work as expected. Edit type, change this. Then if I go to aluminium blue, and if I say okay, well, they really don't. Maybe one of the reasons for it is because if I go and shut it, there you go. We are good to. I did not duplicate it. See, very important to duplicate stuff. Okay, so let's just, no, we can't keep it blue. This is way too ugly. Let's just go back to aluminium. Okay. So up until now, probably you've noticed that I would do this thing where I select a wall, hit BX to create the section box around it, and then I would bring it in order for me to see the layers. Yeah. So I can actually break the wall into all of its components. So if I select it and here the modify thing kind of goes up automatically, I can say create parts. So this is the icon. There's no shortcuts by default. And if I hit OK, click, you would see that it would divide the wall into its components. That doesn't mean that the wall is changed. The wall is the exact same one. You can tag it in plan, you can tag it in elevation, you can tag it in section, you can tag it in whatever you want. Viewing the parts or being able to see them, it's actually a view specific setting, okay? So you see that now I can select only one of them, or like at least I can select one by one, but I cannot select the whole wall. I cannot change the length. I cannot change the height or whatever. I can just select individual parts. So if I select nothing for a moment, and if I go to my properties here, you'll see that there's this thing called parts visibility, which right now states show parts. But if I say show me the original, you will see that this wall behaves like it used to before. There's also an option, not a fan of it. I actually don't know anyone who's a fan of it, to show both. So you can select each part, but you can also select the wall and kind of pull it around. All right. If I put a window in it, nothing really changes. It behaves as usual. Even if I say show parts, the window still stays. I can move it around. So in a way, you haven't lost the wall that you know and love already, all right? It behaves just exactly the same. But the thing is that What I can do now is I can actually select any one layer of the parts, or any one part if you wish, and I can divide it into pieces in a such a way that I can actually create joints in between them. So let me give you an example. I will take the very, very last layer, which is my 32mm PanFab aluminum panels. And after I select it, you'll see that here in the modify, I have this thing called divide parts, okay? And I would hit divide parts, and I have I have two options to do it. I can either sketch a path or choose an intersecting reference. I'll start with the sketching a path because it's easier, but the real power move is in the intersecting references. So I want to sketch, and I would make sure that I set up my plane, pick a plane, and I'll set it up to be the surface itself. So you would see that I can just draw a line like this. I can draw a line like that. If you want, I can have it like this. And then I would just hit OK. So now you would see that it actually started splitting that surface. Not only that, I can actually specify exactly what I want the gap of that split to be. So let's see if I'm still using the example of PanFab here in Canada, I would say something like 19mm. And you'll see that this gap actually widened. I can do something like 25, so it's a little bit more dramatic, and that works. And I can say, okay, so you see that I just split my wall into several different parts. If I ever am not happy with the way I split it, what I can do is I can select it, edit the division, edit the sketch, and I can say, hey buddy, I wanted it to be a little bit straighter here or whatever, hit okay. So now you're good to go. All right, so we've split the elements, but this is not where it ends. I can actually change the material of each of those elements individually, which is great. So now I can, you kind of see where the possibilities go with this, right? So let's say I would select this panel here and this panel here, and look at the properties again. You see where it says material by original. I don't want that. Click material. What do you want? And I'll say, I want aluminium blue. So now it's in blue. I would select this one. Oh, we're getting into Best Buy and IKEA. Turn off the material by original, and I want aluminium yellow. So boom, very quickly, just like that, I'm able to create different pieces, different parts. And again, keep in mind, that doesn't change the way that this wall behaves. If I, for a moment, come here to parts visibility and I show the original, it would look like the monolithic gray aluminium we had at the very beginning. I can slap a window in it, that's fine. I can actually stretch it, that's also fine. And if I go back into my show parts, you will see that the location of the lines where I drew them doesn't matter, it doesn't change. I can put this window right at the intersection, that's fine. The parts would adapt. You see the parts would actually recognize the cutting of the window. So I can actually grab this window, move it somewhere here, and you will see that the parts would adapt to it as well. So this is extremely useful. Another thing is that they're also schedulable. For triangles, it's a little misleading, but if I select any of these parts and if I edit the division and I edit the sketch again, and if I make sure that these lines are, instead of being all funky and stuff, they're all straight. Okay. Again, it messes up a little bit the materials because some of the parts don't exist or yet. Actually, they don't exist anymore. If I select any of these panels, you will see that it gives me the volume, the area, the length, and the height, and the thickness. So I can actually schedule all of this. So if someone asks me, how many panels do you need of particular type or of particular color, I can tell this to them right away. It's absolutely fantastic. I would actually go back to the previous example because it was just slightly prettier, but just slightly, not that many, show parts. Okay, cool. What is happening now? Let's say show original, show parts. All right, fantastic. The thing is that once you divide it into pieces, it's not just the material you can change. You can actually change the thickness of that thing. You can actually change the shape of them individually. So let's say I would select this beautiful yellow here. And if you kind of look at the properties again, there's this thing called show shape handles. And I want you to click this and just watch the handles appear. So now I can actually grab it and have it stick out. Keep in mind, this is the same original Revit wall, but now I can manipulate it literally as I see fit. I can actually select it, bring this down a little bit. And this is not just some random geometry. This is still part of my wall. Love it. And, you know, I can actually grab this one. I can say, show me the handles. Make it a little bit bigger here. Make it a little bit shorter there. And so on and so on and so on. So this becomes very useful. If for whatever reason, I see this piece and I just don't want to see it anymore, I can, let's actually use the blue here as an example. It's going to be more of a contrast. Here at the top where it says exclude parts, click, gone. It's not gone, but it's just excluded. That's all it is. I can select it again and I can restore it so it would come back. So this is also a way if you have certain patterns where certain things need to be in reveal and need to be pushed in, that this is an opportunity for you to do that. It's great. All right, I'm going to delete all of that. And actually by doing this, what you do is you revert the wall back to its original state. And let's do the power move where we're going to dissect this wall using not just lines, but we're going to use reference planes. And this is where the power move is because it actually gives you greater control outside of the wall. So you'll be able to change things like reference planes and grid lines, which in turn are going to be manipulating the wall. So you don't have to kind of go into it every single time, okay? So for that purpose, I'll go and put myself in plan, and I would go to architecture and I would draw a reference plane, okay? And I would draw a reference plane, let's say here, and I would give it a name. And this is important because you actually have to give it a name because you can end up having, let's say, 1,000 reference planes in a very big project. Revit is not interested in keeping track of all of them for you to be able to split a surface. It's only the one that you would name, okay? So I would click here on the name and I would say this is RP for reference plane, cut 1, okay? And then the funny thing is that if I copy it, I just want to constrain it here one time, the next one will be called reference plane cut 2, similarly to the grid lines. So if I do copy just a bunch of times, whatever, I don't care, you will see that it gets to reference plane cut 6 and so on and so on and so on. And I'm just going to put this like dimension line in between them because I'm very picky. I have a limit of how big these panels are. I need to make sure I don't surpass a certain length, let's say 8 feet or whatever it is. So I'll do the WD thing again, where I split my screen and I would select my wall again because I want to create the parts, go back to the same now familiar place, which is called create parts, hit it, and the parts are created. Fantastic. I would choose my external layer, which is my 32mm PanFab aluminum panel. I would divide the parts. And this time, instead of saying edit the sketch, what I would say is use intersecting references. All right. Click these, another window opens, and these references can be your levels, it can be your grid lines, and can be your reference planes. In this particular case, the only thing I'm interested in is cutting it with my reference planes. And no, not grids, reference planes, thank you. So I can go click, 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 say okay, and you would see that the cuts are already in place. Same thing, I can say, I want you to give me a 25mm gap in between them, hit OK, and now my gaps are there. So now the beauty is that if I want to change the location of this particular gap, I don't have to come here, edit the division, edit the sketch, and so on. All I need to do is grab this reference plane and let's say 1 meter here, and it would move. I can move it here, it would move with it. So this is an excellent way to create some kind of a rhythm on a facade. Change the material, because keep in mind, you can still do that, right? I can select it, material by original, no thank you. You know, I can even kind of go to a little bit of a perversion, go for cast in place, concrete, whatever. And actually I can change all the materials one by one. And so this also begs the question of how you deal with this in elevation, or at least in your elevation views, because keep in mind, seeing the part is view specific, right? You didn't change the nature of the wall. Yes, you told Revit, hey, I want you to look at this wall in a little bit of a different way because I'll be splitting it in just a second, but you're still dealing with the same wall. So when I go in my elevation here, so this is the wall I'm facing it, and if I go in, unless I explicitly tell Revit that in this particular view, which can be part of my view template, that I want to see the parts it's just not going to show them to me. The Revit doesn't care. So I would come, and while I'm in my view, I would do parts visibility, show parts, and now I can see them. And you can see how the reference plane is right in the middle. Another reason why I love using this particular method is that when I need to dimension these panels, if I'm using reveals, let's say, which we just covered, it can be a little bit difficult to dimension these, okay? But in this case, in my elevation view, I can, say something like, okay, these are the dimensions, and I can come inside. Oh, this sounds so bad. And then I can put that this is on center. And I will just distribute this all over again. And the manufacturer would know, the middle of my joint is right here, and this is the distance between them. So then they can manufacture it according to this. So even if I move a panel a little bit, or in this case, I'm not moving the panel, I'm moving the reference plane, my dimension would follow. And so it would my annotation. We do this for panels. We also do this for windows, but again, a topic for another conversation. So I hope that so anyways, this concludes the how to wall tutorial in Revit. I really hope that even though we started with something extremely basic as to what goes inside of a wall, by the end of this, you feel a little bit more masterful with walls in Revit. Hopefully, if you're a beginner and there's something about it that felt intimidating, well, this wouldn't be the case anymore. I would encourage all of you to experiment as much as humanly possible. Please do, because the more you do, then the things that feel intimidating now would just become a mechanical kind of like muscle memory, and you'll be able to do it over and over and again. It also makes troubleshooting a lot easier. And most importantly, yielding a software correctly and in depth would help you create better buildings. And this is literally what we need now. We need better buildings. We need good buildings. We need good visuals so that all of us can enjoy it and the public can enjoy it too. My name is Daniel. I really hope you enjoy this. This is a small channel. So please, if you enjoyed it, tell me about it. If I missed something, just put it in the comments and tell me about it. I would actually like to hear your opinion. I would like to hear suggestions. I would like to hear success stories, especially, typical YouTube stuff. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, whatever. There's going to be more coming up. All right, guys. See you on the flip side.